water demand in the first place, and then also the economic benefits of reducing potential treatment costs on the tail end as well.
I want to hear a balanced argument for and against it. I'm looking at more the environmental issues myself, but I do realize that economics drive the economy as far as job creation up in northern Wisconsin.
Hopefully we get more awareness about the mine up here in the Northwoods and the cause and effects of mining altogether.
Tonight, we have a distinguished panel of experts exploring the geology, engineering, economics, environment, and regulation of mining in the Penokee Range.
During the forum, each panelist shared insight from their field of expertise, approaching the issue of mining in the Penokee Range from multiple perspectives. After individual presentations, audience members were encouraged to submit written questions for a discussion with the panelists, moderated by Larry Konopacki of the Wisconsin Legislative Council. Around 400 attended the event in the Campanile Center for the Arts in downtown Minocqua. The following day, panelists Tom Fitz and Cyrus Hester led a field trip in the Penokee Range to take a closer look at the geological landscape and envision the future of the area that could hold the largest non-utility private sector investment and largest open pit mine in Wisconsin history.
In the Penokee Range, the iron formation is called the Ironwood Iron Formation, and it extends from southern Bayfield County, about 75 miles over into Michigan, to near Lake Gogebic. There is a lot of iron in the Ironwood Iron Formation, approximately 3.7 billion tons of economic iron ore. All right, so there's a lot of it in there, and it could play an important role in the iron industry in the future.
There's forces that are non-local that affect the profitability of mining, and it makes that industry somewhat volatile. In the longer run, you need to consider the drawbacks of specializing in a volatile industry. With that being said, I don't think the opening of a mine here in northern Wisconsin puts at risk the counties of being over-specialized in mining. In fact, a good economic development strategy is often diversifying your economic base. And in this case, diversification would be more mining, since there isn't much now.
So when we talk about mining, at the very least, we're talking about a large-scale change that really doesn't have a very good natural analog. There's not an equal in nature of this kind of scale and intensity. It's important to recognize that we're talking about a priority of values when we make decisions to do this. And I don't mean this in a moral sense. I simply mean that the landscapes provide a value. In one sense, it could be an economic in the production of taconite, potential jobs like Dr. Parker talked about. In the other sense, the landscape is currently providing a number of services that are more of a non-market value.
Mining is important in our civilization. Our civilization wouldn't exist, we couldn't sustain ourselves if we weren't mining things out of the ground. Our agricultural industry, our transportation industry, our healthcare industry, our infrastructure, we couldn't sustain that if we didn't mine metal products out of the ground. We need to do this. We need to do it responsibly. We need to ask the question, does Wisconsin really have a good process for how they're going to evaluate these projects?
Along with the permit applications and environmental impact report, mining companies under both the ferrous and non-ferrous law, before beginning any mining activities, if they do have all of their permits approved, the operator has to demonstrate that they're financially stable and that there's money set aside to assure that reclamation can happen at any point during the project, and that long-term monitoring and care of the facility is covered.
I do think we can contain mine waste safely for very long periods of time. We've tested this around the world. It's really a matter of people like the regulatory agencies to make sure that we implement our technologies properly, and the engineers and scientists to make sure that it's designed and executed properly.
In terms of potential environmental impacts, what's proposed is a very large mine, and so environmental impacts are inevitable. It would take an area that is relatively pristine right now and turn it into a mine and a large industrial area. So there certainly would be impacts at the site. The question really is about what are the air and water impacts and what would be affected downstream.
we will need a lot of information in a very high-quality application that shows that there's going to be very little impact on the environment in order to approve the permit submittals.
We do use resources, and if we're going to use resources, then we ought to be thinking about, we ought to be able to produce them here as well. If we're going to buy iPhones and cars and all kinds of other stuff, well, we ought to be responsible enough to produce some of those raw materials that go into those here at home, and we ought to do it well.
We've talked about, very much like Dr. Benson says, that we use these materials, and that's right. There's no doubt about that. But the question looking into the future, when we think in that long time frame, is how are we going to keep using these materials? And to what extent can we look at recycling to get some of these materials and make sure that future generations can live with some semblance of the quality of life we have, because we haven't been borrowing from them using the practices that we developed the last century or century before.